Avalanche and Awakening in the Fire. Cave Edgar had always known that Jana 9 was a dangerous world. The frozen ridges were sharp, the storms endless, and the cliffs whispered of death. Still, he had come with hope, believing his training as a scientist would be enough to face the wild. He had studied storm patterns, he had prepared gear, and he had trusted his own courage. But no book or chart had warned him about the sudden groan of a mountain ready to break. It happened too fast for thought. A deep vibration rolled through the ice under his boots. The snow above cracked like thunder. Then the ridge let go. A wall of white poured down, swallowing everything. Edgar tried to run, but his legs sank. He shouted, but the wind stole his voice. The avalanche hit him like a giant's hand, crushing breath, breaking light. Cold pressed into his chest until he thought his ribs would snap. His mask cracked, the oxygen hissed out in a desperate sigh. He clawed at the snow, but it was like drowning in ice. Then darkness came, heavy and endless. He thought that was the end. He thought no one would ever know how he died. But death did not come. Instead, he woke slowly, half aware, half dreaming. The first thing he felt was warmth, thick and heavy. It was so strange on this frozen world that he thought he must be hallucinating. When he opened his eyes, he saw firelight dancing on stone. The ceiling of the cave dripped with melting ice. Shadows moved across walls painted with strange markings. The smell was sharp and new. Smoke, fat, animal hide. He realized he was lying on a bed of furs and something vast pressed against him. At first he thought the avalanche had buried him in rock. But then he saw the shape. A massive arm lay over him like a tree trunk. The skin was pale blue with lines of fur running down it. Heat poured from it like a living furnace. He tried to pull away, but the grip tightened. Panic surged through him. But he was too weak to fight. Then the face appeared. Silver dreadlocks hung heavy like frozen ropes. Eyes glowed pale, almost white. Fangs flashed when the firelight shifted. Edgar's breath caught, his heart hammered. He thought for a moment he had woken in the jaws of a beast. But the creature did not bite. Instead, it made a sound. A low rumble that carried through the cave. The translator in his ear sparked and hissed. Then it caught fragments. 2 broken words. Warm stay. Edgar froze. The meaning sank into him slowly. This giant was not killing him. She was holding him, keeping him warm. The irony hit him like a knife. He had come to study survival, and now he was the weak one being saved. His throat was dry, his voice broken. He tried to whisper. "I am not fragile." The giant's eyes narrowed. Her lips pulled back and she rumbled again. The translator twisted it into half-clear words. "Fragile? Must keep?" She pulled him tighter against her chest as if proving her point. He felt his thigh burn with pain. Looking down, he saw rough bandages wrapped there. They smelled of smoke and herbs. She had treated him while he slept. She had chosen to save him, not abandon him around the cave. Fire torches flickered. Some were made of bone soaked in fat. The walls bore drawings, spirals of red and black. Hunts and storms painted in ash. This was no wild beast's den. This was a home, primitive but strong, and he had been dragged into its heart. The giant shifted, her claws brushed his arm. Her hand was so large it could cover his head with ease. But her touch, though rough, was careful, not cruel. Edgar realized she was studying him the same way he studied samples. Her eyes burned with a strange curiosity. It was not hatred, it was not hunger, it was something closer to care. When he shook his head weakly, she offered food, a piece of raw meat, bloody and thick. He recoiled. Shaking his head, she frowned, muttered in her tongue, then thrust it into the fire after it seared. She pushed it toward him again. This time he took it, the taste bitter. But it gave him strength. She nodded once, satisfied. Edgar pointed at himself, his voice hoarse. "Edgar, human." "Scientist." The giant tilted her head, then tapped her chest. "Misti," she said, her voice deep and certain. The sound rumbled in the cave. The name clear despite the accent. He repeated it. "Misti." Her pale eyes softened for a moment, and her lips curled just slightly. She repeated his name. "Edgar." The sound of it in her voice sent a shiver down his spine. He realized then that she was more than just a rescuer. She had claimed him. She had dragged him here not to kill him, but to keep him. The snow outside still howled like a predator. But inside the cave, against the chest of the 12-foot Cavewoman, Edgar felt something he had not expected. Not fear, not despair, but the first fragile spark of hope. The march and the first doubt. The storm outside never slept. Snow lashed the cliffs as if the mountain itself wanted to bury all who dared walk upon it. When Misty rose to her full height, she pulled heavy furs across her shoulders and pointed at the cave mouth. Her pale eyes fixed on Edgar, her voice low but firm. Walk. He understood, weak or not, he would not be left behind. Edgar's body screamed with pain as he stood. His thigh burned under the rough bandages. His ribs ached from the avalanche. But Misty's hand clamped on his arm like an iron shackle. Steady and unyielding, she dragged him forward when he stumbled, lifting him as if he weighed nothing. Outside, the wind clawed at his face, icy knives cutting into exposed skin. The blizzard was alive, a white beast that roared in his ears. They trudged across a ridge where shadows moved in the distance. Massive shapes lumbered through the storm, horns twisted like frozen trees. Mammoth beasts, larger than any armored vehicle Edgar had seen. The ground trembled with each step they took. He felt like a tiny insect walking beside monsters, and beside him, the greatest monster of all, his 12-foot savior, walked with calm certainty. Hours later, they reached another cave, larger than the first. Smoke curled out of cracks in the stone, a sign of fire within. When Misty stepped through the entrance, voices rumbled in the dark. Edgar's heart pounded as pale eyes flickered open all around. Figures rose from the shadows, giants like her, taller than doors back on Earth. Some carried clubs carved from tusks, others spears tipped with sharpened bone. Misty barked words in her tongue, guttural and sharp. The translator in Edgar's ear caught fragments. Found in snow, still breathes, mine now. The reaction was instant. A wave of mutters and growls. Some nodded, others sneered. One scarred warrior spat on the ground and turned his back. The tension pressed like the storm outside. Heavier than stone, Edgar understood enough. They saw him as fragile, as burden. He wanted to shout, to prove himself, but his throat was raw. He swallowed the words and kept silent. Misty pushed him toward the fire at the center of the cave. Furs were laid near it, and she forced him to sit, her massive clawed hand pressing his shoulder down. Around him the clan gathered, eyes glowing pale in the firelight. Children peeked from behind their mothers, whispering, then ducking away. Edgar studied the cave while the giants muttered. Hunts painted in red ash coiled across the walls. Marks of storms, spirals of snow, rivers drawn like cracks. This was history written in stone, survival carved into memory. He realized these people were not wild beasts. They were survivors bound by old rules sharper than any weapon. When food was passed, Misty tore a strip of roasted flesh and shoved it into his hands. It was tough, bitter, but he forced it down. Her pale eyes watched every bite as if testing whether he would endure. The clan muttered again. The word fragile came more than once. Every time it cut him, sharper than cold wind. But he kept his head low, waiting, listening, planning later. When the storm outside softened for a moment, Misty moved to the cave mouth. She raised her chin, inhaled deep. Her dreadlocks swaying with the wind, Edgar followed her gaze, watching clouds shift in strange arcs across the horizon. His scientist's mind sparked. He recognized the pattern. A cyclone forming, wide and deadly. The kind that erases valleys in one sweep. The clan would march straight into its teeth if they continued west. He tugged Misty's arm, his voice hoarse. Storm? Danger. He bent and drew a spiral in ash on the ground. Then he pointed south, his hand shaking but certain. The translator struggled with his broken words, but the meaning clawed through. Storm, big west, safe path south. The giants muttered louder, some laughed, some scowled. The scarred warrior barked something sharp. The translator twisted it into, outsider lies, weak. Danger to follow. Misty's head snapped toward him. Her growl shook the fire. She stepped between Edgar and the others. Her shoulders squared, her fangs bared. The clan fell silent under her fury. Then with one final roar, she pointed south. The decision was made. They marched again. A line of pale giants cutting through endless white. Edgar stumbled, each step pain, but he forced himself to keep going. Hours dragged like days until the west horizon ripped open. A storm wall rose higher than mountains. Tearing the land to pieces, snow spun into towers. Ice shards flew like knives. Whole ridges collapsed. Had they gone west, they would all have been buried. The clan stopped, staring in stunned silence. The storm devoured the world where they would have walked. Edgar's chest swelled with pride and terror at once. He had proven himself, but he had also marked himself. Misty gave him a look. Pale eyes glowing with something new, respect, but behind her, the scarred warrior's glare burned cold and dark. And Edgar understood survival had only begun. The real storm was not the blizzard. but the eyes of those who doubted him. Reading storms like a map, the march south did not ease. Snow clawed at their faces, winds howled like hungry beasts, and the ground trembled under the steps of horned giants in the distance. Edgar walked between shadows larger than houses, his breath ragged, every step a fight against pain. Yet his mind refused to sleep. It studied, it measured, it searched for patterns. Jana 9 was merciless, but even merciless things had rules. He began to see them when the wind shifted suddenly. He knew a storm front moved close. When the snow packed hard underfoot, he knew a hollow space waited beneath, ready to crack. When the sky darkened not with clouds but with strange shimmering arcs, he knew predators circled above. The clan walked with brute strength, but Edgar walked with observation. And observation became survival one morning. They reached a valley bright as glass. The surface stretched smooth and endless, shining with trapped light. Hunters growled warnings, their pale eyes narrowing. Edgar felt the danger before the first sound. The ice groaned, deep and heavy, like the breath of something dying. He shouted, his voice broken but fierce, "Spread out wide. Wait apart." The translator carried the meaning roughly. But Misti heard it. She roared at the clan, ordering them to step wider. The warriors obeyed with hesitation. But the shift saved them. Cracks spidered across the surface. But the ice did not give way. A sled still sank partly into a fracture, without thinking. Edgar tied a length of torn gear cord around his waist. He crawled forward on his belly, ice cold against his chest. The tribe muttered in disbelief, some even laughed. But he hooked the sled, signaled, and Misti pulled it free with one massive heave. Supplies were saved, and with them days of survival. By the time they reached the far bank, Edgar's hands shook with exhaustion. His cloak was soaked, his lips blue, but he stood tall. Misti placed her huge hand on his shoulder. A silent acknowledgement. Some hunters gave sharp nods. Not friendly, but not dismissive either. For the first time, he was not only tolerated, he was seen, but not by all. The scarred warrior stood apart, his jaw tight, his pale eyes burning with a quiet fire. Every glance from him was sharp as a knife. The whispers spread that night by the fire. Edgar caught words through the translator. Outsider, curse, weak, danger. Each one landed like a stone in his chest. He forced himself to ignore it. Instead, he studied the cave walls where firelight revealed old carvings, spirals, storms, hunts, migrations, symbols etched with bone and ash. He traced them with his fingers, comparing them to patterns he knew from data back home. And in that moment, a new plan sparked in his mind. The rivers here ran under ice, thin in places, strong in others. The enemy clans hunted them just as the storms did. If he could map the weaknesses, he could turn the land itself into a weapon. Not brute force, but strategy, not claws, but knowledge. He sketched in the ash near the fire, a river bend marked with cracks, torches placed to drive enemies into one narrow path, fat-soaked braids laid ready to ignite. When the weight pressed down, the ice would break, swallowing foes in black water. It was primitive, yes, but it could work. Misti crouched beside him, watching with pale eyes. Her dreadlocks swayed as she studied his markings. When he finished, she gave a slow nod. Her deep voice rumbled, "Land fight with us." Edgar looked up at her massive form. His breath steady now. "Yes," he whispered. "The land itself can fight, but not everyone saw hope in his plan." The scarred warrior rose, his growl cutting through the firelight. The translator spat fragments, tricks, weakness, coward. Not strength, others muttered agreement. Suspicion stirred like smoke. Edgar's gut tightened. He had proven his worth on the ice, but every step forward earned him new enemies. That night, when the clan slept in piles of furs, Edgar stayed awake. The fire hissed. Shadows flickered across the walls. He felt eyes on him even in the dark. Not the warm, protective eyes of Misti, but the cold, waiting stare of someone who wanted him gone. He clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "I will not break, not to the storm, not to them." He knew the blizzard outside was merciless, but the true danger might come from within the fire cave itself. And the scarred warrior's hatred was only just beginning. Ice trial and river trap, the clan moved again before dawn. The sky glowed faint silver through the blizzard, a false light that gave no warmth. Misti led at the front, her shoulders wrapped in tusk hide, her voice rumbling commands that rolled like thunder. Edgar trudged behind her, his legs weak but his mind sharp. Every ridge, every crack in the ice became a note in his private map. By midday, scouts returned with grim news. The rival clan had been sighted. their shadows drifting across the horizon like ghosts, warriors taller than trees carrying bone spears carved with blood marks. The hunters whispered that they followed fresh, hungry, ready to strike. Fear flickered even in the pale eyes of the strong. Inside the new cave, a council gathered. Fires burned in stone pits. Smoke coiled toward cracks in the ceiling. The giants argued, voices deep and harsh. Edgar caught broken words through the translator. Fight, flee, storm, weakness, outsider. Misti stood like a tower, her fangs bared. Her chest heaving as she shouted them silent. Edgar stepped forward, ash under his boots. He bent low, drew with a charred stick across the stone. He sketched the river bend he had studied. Thin ice marked with black spirals. Strong ice marked with lines. Torches drawn as circles. Arrows to drive the enemy where the ice would fail. The giants leaned closer, their shadows huge on the wall. Some growled, some muttered, but none looked away. Misti crouched beside Edgar, her pale eyes watching as his hand moved. Her voice rumbled. Land fight with us. Edgar lifted his head, his throat raw. Yes, the land can kill them. One scarred warrior barked laughter, his voice sharp and cruel. The translator twisted it into fragments. Coward trick, weak path, not strength. He spat into the fire, daring anyone to follow such madness, but Misti roared, her voice shaking loose dust from the stone ceiling. If you do not trust, then fight me now, she thundered. No one rose, no one spoke, the matter was settled. The clan prepared through the night. Hunters carried fat-soaked ropes, dipping them into pots of grease until they dripped. Warriors drove bone stakes into the snow near the riverbank. Children and elders were led deeper into the caves, hidden from the coming fight. Misti moved through them all like a storm-given flesh. Ordering, shaping, protecting, Edgar worked beside her. Though his hands trembled from cold, he marked the weakest parts of the ice with symbols in ash. He showed hunters how to spread their weight, how to lure enemies into the funnel. Every gesture he made earned either a nod of respect or a glare of suspicion, but he did not stop. He could not stop. At last silence fell, the kind of silence that comes before violence. The snow outside hissed softly, the air sharp as broken glass. Edgar lay awake near the fire, watching the drawings on the cave wall flicker. Storms, hunts, rivers swallowing prey. It felt as if the walls themselves whispered of what was coming. Before dawn, Misti roused him with a hand larger than his chest. Her eyes glowed faint in the firelight. She handed him a crude bone blade. Rough but sharp, her voice rumbled. Carry, fight if must. Edgar swallowed hard, nodding, feeling the weight of both blade and responsibility. The clan moved in silence to the river. The world was still except for the moan of water under the ice. They took positions as Edgar had drawn. Hunters spread wide. Warriors crouched with torches ready. The scarred warrior sneered at Edgar as he passed, but said nothing. His pale eyes promised something darker than words. The horizon cracked with motion. Shadows rose in the snow, the rival clan advancing. They carried tusk spears and bone shields, their roars shaking the valley. The air itself trembled as they came. Edgar's stomach twisted. His plan was no longer theory. It was about to become life or death. Misti stood at the front, taller than all. Her dreadlocks whipped in the wind. Her fangs gleamed with firelight. She raised her arm. And the hunters lit their torches. Flames burst against the storm. Orange fire defying endless white. The enemy roared back, pounding the ice with their clubs, daring them to resist. The trap was set, but it would only work if the enemy followed the path. Edgar's breath burned in his chest as he waited. Every crack of ice sounded like doom. Every step of giants echoed like thunder. If the ice held too long, his clan would be slaughtered. If it broke too soon, the trap would kill them all. The river groaned, long and deep. Misti growled low, glancing once at Edgar. Her eyes were not filled with doubt, but with trust, and in that instant, Edgar realized something. He was no longer just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the right to belong, to prove he was not fragile, not a burden, to show that even a small man could change the fate of giants. And when the enemy charged, the storm itself seemed to hold its breath. Betrayal in the blizzard night fell heavy over the river valley. The enemy had retreated after testing the ice, their war cries fading into the storm. But victory was not certain, only delayed. The clan huddled inside the cave, fires crackling, the air thick with smoke and fear. Edgar sat close to the flames, his body trembling from cold and exhaustion. Misti crouched near him, sharpening a bone spear, her pale eyes glowing faint in the firelight. Her presence was a wall of protection, But Edgar felt unease growing in the shadows. He caught whispers carried through the smoke. The translator stuttered but gave him pieces. Outsider, weak, curse, slows us. Each word cut sharper than the cold outside. The scarred warrior sat apart, his jaw clenched, his gaze never leaving Edgar. His eyes burned like embers waiting for wind. When the others looked away, he whispered to those closest. Their pale faces hardened, their voices low but sharp. Edgar knew what they spoke of. Though the words were broken, they wanted him gone. Misti sensed it too. She rose suddenly, her roar silencing all talk. She declared with thunder in her chest, "He is mine." Her hand settled protectively on Edgar's shoulder. Daring anyone to defy her, no one challenged her in the open. But their eyes told another story. Hatred did not vanish, it only hid, waiting, later. As the fires burned low, Edgar drifted into uneasy sleep. Dreams of avalanches and storms clawed at his mind. He woke with a start, rough hands seizing him. A palm clamped over his mouth, dragging him into the cold. The cave fire dimmed behind him. Giants still slept, or pretended to. No help came. Snow sliced his face like blades, the storm roared as if it too wished him gone. They dragged him to the mouth of the cave. There stood the scarred warrior, pale eyes blazing with fury. His voice cracked the night, the translator breaking it into jagged words. "Fragile outsider, curse us, weak blood." Die now. Edgar's knees hit the snow, his breath ripped away by the wind. He tried to speak, but a blow smashed across his face. Blood filled his mouth, pain burned in his skull. The scarred warrior raised a tusk club high. Ready to crush him, around them stood others. Silent, their faces hard. Not all believed in this betrayal, but none dared stop it for a heartbeat. Edgar believed it was the end. He thought of Earth, of cities far away, of Data lost in snow. He thought of Misti's pale eyes, the fire in her voice, and then the blizzard itself seemed to split open with a roar. Misti burst into the night, her dreadlocks whipping like frozen ropes. Her voice thundered above the storm. She slammed into the scarred warrior with the force of an avalanche. He stumbled, snow exploding under his weight. Misti placed herself between Edgar and death. Her chest heaved, her fangs bared. Her roar shook the cliffs. "You touch him." "You touch me," the translator hissed. "He is mine." The scarred warrior spat blood into the snow. His voice rose, sharp as bone-breaking. "He is not one of us, never will be. He cannot fight. Cannot bleed for clan." His words carried weight. Eyes turned, murmurs stirred. Edgar's heart pounded. He saw it. The divide in their stares, half filled with doubt, half filled with fear. Misti growled low, her breath steaming in the frozen dark. Then she slammed her fist into the snow, cracking the ice beneath. "Then fight me," she roared, her voice rolling like thunder across the valley. The challenge left no room for retreat. No room for excuses, the scarred warrior snarled, stepping forward, his muscles tight. His claws sharp, the others drew back, forming a wide circle in the storm. The firelight behind them flickered. Shadows stretched across the snow. Edgar stumbled back, his heart a hammer in his chest. He wanted to stop it, to shout, but he knew he could not. This was not his fight, not his way. Misti had thrown her life into the fire for him, and now strength would decide if he lived or died. They clashed with roars that shook the mountain. Fists slammed like hammers. Claws tore through hide and fur. Snow sprayed in bursts, each blow carving the night with violence. The scarred warrior was strong, scarred from countless battles. But Misti was stronger, stronger in muscle, stronger in purpose, stronger in fury. She fought not just for pride, not just for survival. She fought for him, for Edgar, for the fragile outsider who carried no claws. Every strike she threw was a promise, every roar a shield. At last she seized him by the throat, lifting him high. Her fangs gleamed as she thundered, "He is mine. He is clan." She hurled him into the snow, broken, beaten, his pride shattered. The circle fell silent, only the storm howled. No one moved, no one spoke. The scarred warrior staggered to his feet. Blood running down his chest, he spat again, his pale eyes filled with venom. Then he limped into the blizzard, vanishing into white darkness. Exiled, but not defeated in spirit, Misti turned at last, kneeling beside Edgar. Her massive hand cupped his bruised face with surprising gentleness. Her voice rumbled low, "No one will take you." "Not while I breathe." Edgar's chest tightened. His eyes burned. In that moment fear faded, replaced by something stronger, trust fierce and unshakable. The clan drifted back to the fires, muttering in uneasy silence. But Edgar knew the battle was not over. The scarred warrior was gone, but his hatred was alive. Some in the clan still doubted, still whispered in shadows. The storm outside was cruel, but the storm within might prove deadlier. And as Misti wrapped her arms around him by the fire, Edgar whispered to himself, "I am not leaving her, not now, not ever." Siege of the Red Ice. The storm cleared just enough to reveal fire on the horizon, orange dots in the endless white. Moving closer, the scouts returned breathless, their voices harsh with fear. The rival clan was coming back. And this time their numbers were greater. At their front walked the scarred traitor, his pale eyes burning with hate. Inside the cavern, the clan prepared with heavy silence. Warriors sharpened tusk spears until sparks flew. Hunters dipped torches into fat-soaked pots, their hands steady despite trembling hearts. Mothers pulled children deep into side tunnels. Shielding them with furs, Edgar stood among them. Clutching his crude bone blade, he knew this battle would decide everything. Misti moved like a storm given shape. She barked orders, her voice deep and commanding. She tied bone charms into her dreadlocks, marks of war. Her pale eyes glowed with fire, not fear. She placed a massive hand on Edgar's shoulder. "Stay close, fight with mine, not just blade," she rumbled. He nodded, his chest tight but steady. The clan lined the riverbank as the enemy descended the ridge. Dozens of massive forms, tusk weapons gleaming, war cries ripping the frozen air. The sound shook Edgar's bones, but he stood firm. He glanced at the river, black water shifting beneath thin ice. The trap waited, but it would only work if the enemy was driven into it. The first wave hit like thunder. Bone clubs slammed into shields of tusk. Torches flared against the storm. Misti roared at the front, her claws tearing through the first attackers. Each strike threw giants back into the snow. She fought with the fury of a blizzard. Her presence unshakable, Edgar moved along the flank, shouting through the translator, "Hold the line, push them wide," toward the river. Hunters heard him and lit torches. Flames forced the enemy inward, narrowing their path just as he had drawn in ash. The funnel began to form, but the scarred traitor broke through. His roar cut through the battle like a knife. He smashed defenders aside, his tusk club dripping with blood. His eyes locked on Misti, rage burning hotter than the fire around them. "Your weakness shames us," the translator twisted his words. "You fall with the fragile outsider." Misti met his charge head-on. Their clash shook the ground. Claws against claws, fists cracking bone. Snow sprayed in bursts. Blood steamed on the ice. The clan faltered. Torn between fear and fury, Edgar saw it, hesitation creeping like frost. If they lost heart now, all would be lost. He seized a torch and sprinted to the river's edge. Flames licked at the fat-soaked ropes laid across weak ice. He lit them, fire racing in bright veins over the frozen surface. The enemy, blinded by fury, charged straight into the trap. The ice groaned, split, and then shattered. A roar like thunder rolled as the river swallowed dozens whole. The water churned black and deadly. Warriors screamed as they sank beneath the broken surface. The rest stumbled, panic breaking their charge. Edgar's voice cut through the chaos. "Now push!" The clan surged forward, their roars louder than the storm. They drove the enemy back, striking with bone and fire. On the riverbank, Misti and the scarred traitor fought like titans. Each blow cracked the air, each roar tore through the night. Edgar's heart pounded as he watched. The scarred one fought with hatred, but Misti fought with purpose. She fought for Edgar, for the clan, for survival itself still. The traitor was relentless. He slammed her back, his claws raking across her shoulder. Blood sprayed, steaming on the snow. Edgar's body moved before his fear could stop him. He hurled a burning torch into the traitor's path. Flames burst between them, forcing him to stumble. Misti seized the opening. With a roar that shook the valley, she struck. Her claws ripped across his chest, sending him sprawling onto the ice. The river cracked beneath his weight. He clawed at the surface, roaring in fury. But the ice broke fully, and the black water swallowed him whole. Silence fell for a breath. Then the enemy, seeing their champion lost, broke into chaos. Some fled into the storm. Others fell beneath Misti's clan. The battle ended not with a cheer, but with the sound of heavy breaths and blood dripping onto snow. Edgar dropped to his knees, his lungs burning. His blade slipped from his hands. His body shaking, Misti strode toward him, her shoulders torn, her body marked with wounds. But her pale eyes burned with victory. She lifted him in her massive arms. roaring to her people, "He is no burden. He is clan." The cave erupted with voices, some hesitant, some fierce. But the sound carried across the valley. Edgar's chest swelled with pride and disbelief. He had stood with them, he had fought. And his plan had saved lives for the first time. He felt he belonged not as a fragile outsider, but as part of something greater than himself. The storm still raged on the horizon. But inside the circle of fire and blood, Edgar knew one truth. He was no longer a man kept alive by another's strength. He was a fighter, a thinker, a survivor, and with Misti at his side, he was clan. Reckoning of the clan and the true reason she saved him. The battle was won, but the silence that followed was heavy. Blood stained the snow, smoke curled from dying torches, and the cries of the wounded echoed in the cave. Misti stood tall, her body marked with fresh scars, her chest heaving with breath. Edgar leaned against her massive arm, his strength drained but his spirit burning bright. They had survived, but survival was not enough. The clan gathered around the great fire that night. Elders sat with their pale eyes fixed on the flames. Warriors stood in a circle, their voices low. Children huddled close to their mothers, listening though they did not understand the weight of the moment. It was time for the reckoning, a ritual older than memory. Every great trial demanded judgment, every victory demanded truth. One elder rose, his voice deep and heavy. He spoke of the avalanche, of the outsider found in the snow. He spoke of storms turned aside, of rivers broken, of enemies drowned. He spoke of betrayal in the blizzard, of blood spilled between their own. And then he asked the question that burned in every heart. Was the outsider truly clan, or only a burden carried by pride? The murmurs rose sharp and fierce. Some voices called Edgar a curse, too fragile, too small, a shadow dragging at their strength. Others shouted that he had saved them, that without his warning, they would be bones under ice. The circle trembled with division. The fire cracked, sparks dancing like stars in the smoke. Edgar felt their eyes cut into him. Weighing his worth, he had feared storms, beasts and traitors, but this moment struck deeper than all. Misti roared, her voice shaking the chamber. She declared him hers, not a burden, not fragile, but clan. Her fangs glinted in the firelight as she dared anyone to deny her. But the elders lifted their hands, silencing her. "It is not for one to decide," they said. "It is for all." Edgar's heart pounded. His hands shook. He knew if he stayed silent, they might turn against him if they cast him out now. The storm outside would finish what the avalanche began. He drew in a ragged breath and stepped forward into the circle. Every giant eye followed him, every voice hushed. He spoke. His words cracked but steady. "I came to this world as a scientist, thinking my tools would protect me. I lost them to snow, I lost my strength to cold. I should have died. But Misti pulled me from the ice when I was nothing but fragile. She kept me warm when the storm wanted me gone. You call me weak, but I read the sky. I warned of storms. I turned the river against your enemies. I bled with you. I fought with you, and I will fight again. I am small. Yes, but I am not nothing. I am clan if you will have me." The cave held its breath. The elders stared with pale eyes unreadable. The warriors muttered, some scornful, some thoughtful. Then Misti stepped to his side, her massive hand covering his shoulder. Her voice thundered, "He is mine, but more than mine. He is yours. You deny him, you deny me, and if you deny me, you lose more than you know." The silence cracked. One hunter roared agreement, then another, voices rising. The firelight caught their faces, no longer filled with doubt but with respect. The elders nodded slowly, their voices deep and final. "Then he is clan," they said. Relief crashed through Edgar's chest like a wave. His knees nearly buckled, but Misti steadied him with one massive hand. The circle broke into sound. Roars echoing through the cave, not all voices joined. Some still muttered in the shadows. But enough had spoken and the law was clear. He was no longer outsider, he was clan later. As the fires burned low, Misti led him deeper into the caverns. The walls glowed faintly with the heat of the earth, warm mist rising from cracks in the stone. Here the air was softer, the roar of the storm far away. She lowered herself onto a bed of furs, her pale eyes never leaving him. Her voice rumbled low, meant only for him. "You wonder why I saved you," she said. Her claws traced the stone, carving symbols older than time, long ago before memory. "A small star traveler came to our people. He had no claws, no fangs, no giant strength. But he taught us fire. He showed us caves that breathed warmth. He gave us wisdom. When storms took him, our mothers made a vow if ever another small one came, we would keep them warm. Edgar's breath caught. She had not dragged him from the avalanche only out of instinct. She had done it to honor a promise carved into the bones of her people, but then her voice softened, her fangs glinting as her lips curled in a rare smile. At first you were a promise I had to keep. Now, you are my choice. Her forehead pressed gently against his, her warmth wrapped around him like a shield against the storm. Edgar closed his eyes, his voice a whisper. And you are mine, not because you saved me, but because you made me stronger. Outside, the storm howled across Jana 9, endless and merciless. But inside the cavern, fire burned bright. He had come to this world fragile, a scientist chasing data. Now he was clan, bound by trust, by survival, by love, born in the heart of the storm. And for the first time since the avalanche, Edgar knew the truth. He had not only survived, he had found a home.